Imagine this: you're pregnant, engaged to a billionaire, dreaming of forever until he dumps you for a seductive rival, leaving you penniless and heartbroken. You're just a distraction, he says as she smirks in victory. Crushed, humiliated. You hit rock bottom, jobless, scammed, even fighting to keep your child from their clutches. But 3 years later, you return not as the victim, but as the CEO of a thriving empire, snatching awards right under their noses. You thought I'd disappear. Watch me destroy your world, you declare, turning the tables in the ultimate revenge. From utter despair to sweet triumph. This is Charlotte's story, a roller coaster of betrayal, resilience, and payback that proves no one stays down forever. Stick around to see how she rises. And if you're inspired by tales like this, give it a thumbs up. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if betrayed like that? And subscribe for more empowering stories of comeback kings and queens. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floor of the Manhattan penthouse as Charlotte Morrison stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, her hand resting protectively over her barely visible bump. At 28, she had everything she had ever dreamed of: a successful career as a marketing executive, a loving fiancé, and now, a baby on the way. The engagement ring on her finger caught the city lights below, a 3-carat reminder of the promise Marcus Blackwood had made to her just 6 months ago. Marcus Blackwood. Even his name carried weight in the business world. At 34, he had built Blackwood Industries from a small tech startup into a billion-dollar empire, specializing in sustainable energy solutions. His dark hair, sharp jawline, and piercing blue eyes had graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune more times than Charlotte could count. But it wasn't his wealth that had captured her heart. It was the way he listened when she spoke about her dreams, the gentle way he brushed her hair from her face when she was stressed, and the vulnerability he showed only to her during their quiet moments together. "You're going to love the nursery plans," Charlotte called out as she heard Marcus's key in the lock. She had spent the afternoon with an interior designer, carefully selecting soft pastels and organic materials for their future child's room. "I was thinking we could put the crib by the east window so the baby can see the sunrise every morning." Marcus entered the living room, but something in his demeanor made Charlotte's smile falter. His usually confident stride seemed hesitant, and he wouldn't meet her eyes. Behind him walked a woman Charlotte recognized from the business pages, Victoria Sterling, the stunning CEO of Sterling Dynamics, Blackwood Industries' biggest competitor. Victoria's platinum blonde hair was pulled back in a severe chignon. Her red lips curved in what could barely be called a smile, and her emerald eyes held a calculating coldness that made Charlotte's skin prickle. "Charlotte, we need to talk," Marcus said, his voice devoid of the warmth she was accustomed to hearing. He moved to the bar cart, pouring himself a scotch with hands that Charlotte noticed were trembling slightly. "About what?" Charlotte's voice came out smaller than she intended. Something deep in her stomach, beyond where the baby lay sleeping, twisted with dread. Victoria stepped forward, her designer heels clicking against the marble with the precision of a countdown timer. "About the future of both our companies and how certain personal entanglements are no longer viable." Charlotte looked between Marcus and Victoria, her mind struggling to process what was happening. "I don't understand." "Marcus, what is she talking about?" Marcus finally raised his eyes to meet hers, and Charlotte saw something there that made her heart stop. It wasn't love, or even regret. It was pity. "Charlotte, I've made a decision. Victoria and I are merging our companies, and we're together now." The words hit Charlotte like a physical blow. She gripped the back of the sofa to steady herself, her engagement ring suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Together, Marcus. I'm pregnant with your child. We're getting married in 3 months. The merger requires a more strategic alliance," Victoria interjected, her voice smooth as silk but sharp as a blade. "Marcus and I have discovered we share the same vision for the future, both personally and professionally." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears, but she fought them back. "Marcus, look at me. Really look at me. Tell me this isn't happening. Tell me you haven't thrown away everything we built together for a business deal." Marcus set down his glass and walked toward her, but his movements were mechanical, as if he were forcing himself through each step. "Charlotte, you're a wonderful woman, but you have to understand, this is bigger than us. The merger will create the largest sustainable energy company in North America. It's what I've worked my entire life for." "And what about what we've worked for?" Charlotte's voice cracked despite her efforts to remain strong. "What about our baby? What about the promises you made to me?" "The baby." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Charlotte had once found endearing, but now seemed like a nervous tic. "We'll figure something out. Financial support, of course. But Charlotte, you have to see that marrying you now would be complicated." Victoria moved closer to Marcus, placing a possessive hand on his arm. "The announcement will be made tomorrow. Blackwood Sterling Enterprises will be the new name, and Marcus and I will be co-CEOs. We've already begun the legal proceedings." Charlotte felt the room spinning around her. The penthouse that had been her home for 2 years suddenly felt foreign, hostile. The plans they had made, the wedding, the nursery, the life they were supposed to build together, crumbled around her like a house of cards in a hurricane. "So that's it," Charlotte whispered, her hand moving instinctively to protect her unborn child. "You're just discarding me, like I'm some outdated piece of equipment you're replacing with a newer model." "Don't be dramatic," Victoria said, her tone suggesting she was discussing something as mundane as the weather. "You're young. You'll find someone else, someone more suitable to your station." The condescension in Victoria's voice ignited something fierce in Charlotte's chest. She straightened her shoulders and looked directly at Marcus. "You know what, you're right. This is bigger than us. Because I'm just now seeing who you really are, and you're so much smaller than I ever imagined." Marcus flinched as if she had slapped him. "Charlotte, please don't make this harder than it has to be." "Harder than it has to be," Charlotte's voice rose, years of contained emotions finally breaking free. "You're abandoning your pregnant fiancée for a corporate merger, and you're worried about me making it hard. You want to see hard. Marcus Hard is being 28 years old and pregnant, and having the man you love tell you that you were just a placeholder until something better came along." "That's not," Marcus started, but Charlotte cut him off. "Yes, it is exactly what you're saying. You're saying that I wasn't worth fighting for, that our baby wasn't worth staying for, that 2 years of love and planning and dreaming meant less to you than stock options and market shares?" Victoria checked her diamond-encrusted watch with exaggerated patience. "Are we quite finished with the theatrics, Marcus? Darling, we have dinner reservations at Le Bernardin in an hour, and I need time to change." The casual cruelty of Victoria's words, calling Marcus darling while his pregnant fiancée stood broken before them, was like salt in an open wound. Charlotte realized in that moment that this wasn't a spontaneous decision born of passion or even business opportunity. This was calculated, planned, orchestrated. "How long?" Charlotte asked quietly, her voice steady for the first time since they had arrived. "How long have you two been planning this?" Marcus and Victoria exchanged a look that told Charlotte everything she needed to know. This wasn't a sudden merger. This was a long-term strategy, and she had been the fool who never saw it coming. "The merger discussions began 8 months ago," Victoria said with a satisfied smile. "Of course, the personal aspects developed more organically." 8 months. Charlotte's mind reeled. 8 months ago, she and Marcus had just gotten engaged. 8 months ago, she had been planning their wedding while he was planning her replacement. 8 months of lying, of pretending to love her while orchestrating her disposal. "I want you out of my apartment by the end of the week," Marcus said, not even having the decency to look ashamed. "The penthouse is in my name. Obviously, I'll have my lawyer draw up a separation agreement. Something fair." "Fair?" Charlotte's laugh held no humor. "You think there's a fair way to do this? Charlotte, I understand you're upset, but let's be practical. You have a good job. You'll receive child support, and you're young enough to start over. This doesn't have to be the end of the world." In that moment, Charlotte saw Marcus clearly for the first time. Not as the successful businessman she had fallen in love with, not as the gentleman who had proposed to her under the stars on a beach in Santorini, but as he truly was, a man who could reduce the destruction of someone's entire life to a practical matter to be handled efficiently. "You're right," Charlotte said, surprising them both with her calm tone. "This doesn't have to be the end of the world. It's just the end of my world as I knew it. But maybe that's not such a bad thing." She walked past them toward the bedroom, her back straight and her head held high. She could hear Victoria's low laugh and Marcus's murmured response, but their words no longer mattered. What mattered now was protecting herself and her baby from the wreckage of what she had thought was love. As Charlotte began packing her belongings, her hands trembling despite her outward composure, she found herself thinking about her mother. Eleanor Morrison had been a single mother who had raised Charlotte alone after her father left when Charlotte was 5. Eleanor had always told her daughter that strength wasn't about never falling down, it was about how you got back up. "I don't know how to get back up from this." "Mom," Charlotte whispered to the empty bedroom, her hand resting on her belly. "But I promise you, and I promise this baby, that I will figure it out." Through the walls, she could hear Victoria's laughter echoing through what had been her home. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard, but it also served as a reminder. Victoria Sterling thought she had won. Marcus thought he had made a clean, efficient break. They both thought Charlotte Morrison was just another casualty of business, easily forgotten and quickly replaced. They had no idea how wrong they were. As Charlotte folded her clothes and placed them in suitcases, she began to formulate a plan. Not for revenge. Revenge was petty and short-sighted. No. What she was planning was much more strategic. She was planning to become someone they couldn't ignore, couldn't dismiss, and couldn't destroy. Charlotte Morrison was about to disappear. But who she became next would be someone Victoria Sterling and Marcus Blackwood would never see coming. The next morning, Charlotte sat in a small cafe in Brooklyn, far from the gleaming towers of Manhattan where her old life had crumbled. She had spent the night in a modest hotel, unable to bear another moment in the penthouse with its memories and broken promises. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls, some from concerned friends who had seen the merger announcement on the financial news, others from reporters who had somehow gotten wind of the personal drama behind the business headlines. She ignored them all. Instead, she focused on the laptop screen in front of her, researching everything she could find about Victoria Sterling. If she was going to compete with this woman, and she was going to compete, she needed to understand her enemy. What she found was both impressive and disturbing. Victoria Sterling had built her company through a series of strategic acquisitions and hostile takeovers. She had a reputation for identifying weaknesses in her competitors and exploiting them ruthlessly. She collected companies the way some people collected art, not out of love, but out of a desire to possess and control. But there was something else in Victoria's pattern that caught Charlotte's attention. Every major acquisition had been preceded by a personal relationship with someone in the target company. A business partner here, a board member there, even a CEO's spouse in one memorable case. Victoria didn't just buy companies. She infiltrated them from the inside, using charm and seduction as weapons as effective as any corporate raider's arsenal. Charlotte realized with crystal clarity that she hadn't just been Marcus's fiancée who became inconvenient when a better deal came along. She had been a mark, a target. Victoria had identified Marcus as someone she wanted to acquire, and Charlotte had been the obstacle that needed to be removed. The realization should have devastated her further, but instead, it filled her with a cold, clear purpose. Victoria Sterling thought she was a master chess player who had just won a decisive victory, but Charlotte was about to show her what happened when you underestimated your opponent. Charlotte closed the laptop and placed her hand on her belly, where her baby was growing stronger every day. "Your daddy thinks I'm just going to quietly disappear," she whispered, "but he's about to learn that Morrison women don't disappear. We evolve." 3 years. 1,095 days of rebuilding a life from the ground up. Charlotte sat in her modest apartment in Queens, watching her daughter Emma play with building blocks on the living room floor. At 3 years old, Emma had Marcus's dark hair, but Charlotte's determined spirit, and watching her stack colorful blocks into impossible towers always reminded Charlotte that some things that seemed fragile could be stronger than they appeared. The apartment was a far cry from the Manhattan penthouse, but it was theirs. Charlotte had used her savings to secure the lease and had slowly filled it with furniture from secondhand stores and flea markets. Each piece told a story of careful budgeting and creative solutions. The kitchen table she had refinished herself, the bookshelves built from reclaimed wood, the curtains sewn from fabric she had found on clearance. But the apartment was just the visible part of Charlotte's transformation. The real change had happened inside her, day by day, decision by decision, as she built something new from the ashes of her old life. The first year had been the hardest. Pregnancy alone, with morning sickness that seemed to last all day, and nights spent lying awake worrying about how she would support a child on her own. Marcus had been true to his word about financial support, a monthly check that was generous enough to cover basic expenses, but not enough to live comfortably. Charlotte suspected this was intentional, a way to keep her dependent and grateful while ensuring she couldn't afford to cause trouble. She had tried to return to her old job at the marketing firm, but something had changed. Maybe it was the pregnancy, or maybe it was the way her colleagues looked at her with a mixture of pity and judgment. The woman who had been dumped by Marcus Blackwood for Victoria Sterling became a cautionary tale whispered about in break rooms and conference calls. Charlotte found herself assigned to smaller accounts, excluded from major presentations, and gradually marginalized until it became clear that her career at the firm was over. The day she submitted her resignation, Charlotte felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. Fear because she was cutting her last tie to financial security. Relief because she was finally free to become who she was meant to be, rather than who others expected her to be. Emma's birth had been a turning point. Holding her daughter for the first time, Charlotte felt a strength she didn't know she possessed. This tiny person depended on her completely, and failure was not an option. During those long nights of feeding and changing and soothing, Charlotte began to formulate her plan. She started small, very small, using her laptop at the kitchen table during Emma's naps. Charlotte began freelancing for small businesses that needed marketing help but couldn't afford big agencies. Her first client was a bakery in her neighborhood that needed help with social media. The owner, Mrs. Chen, paid her $50 to create a Facebook page and post pictures of the daily specials. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. Word spread slowly through the network of small business owners in Queens. Charlotte had a gift for understanding what made each business unique and helping them tell their story in a way that connected with customers. The bakery's sales increased by 30% in the first month. The florist down the street hired her to redesign their website. The family restaurant on the corner asked her to help them navigate online reviews. Each success led to another client, and Charlotte began to see a pattern emerging. Small businesses were underserved by the marketing world. The big agencies didn't want to bother with accounts that couldn't pay six-figure fees, and the business owners didn't have the knowledge or time to handle their own marketing effectively. There was a gap in the market, and Charlotte was uniquely positioned to fill it. By Emma's second birthday, Charlotte had officially launched Morrison Marketing Solutions. The name was intentional. She wanted Marcus and Victoria to see it if they ever bothered to look. She wanted them to know that the woman they had discarded was not only surviving, but thriving. The business grew steadily. Charlotte hired her first employee, a recent college graduate named Sarah, who was eager to learn and willing to work for modest pay in exchange for real experience. Then came David, a graphic designer who had been laid off from a big agency and was happy to work remotely for clients who appreciated his creativity. But Charlotte's real breakthrough came when she landed her first major client, a chain of organic grocery stores that was struggling to compete with larger retailers. The owner, Janet Rodriguez, had built the business from a single store into 5 locations, but she was losing customers to chains that had bigger marketing budgets and slicker campaigns. Charlotte spent weeks studying the business, shopping in the stores, talking to employees and customers. What she discovered was that Janet's stores weren't just selling groceries. They were serving as community hubs where neighbors met. Families found healthy options for children with allergies, and elderly customers received personal attention that made them feel valued. The marketing campaign Charlotte developed didn't focus on prices or product selection. Instead, it told the story of real people whose lives had been improved by what Janet's stores offered. The campaign, more than groceries, were neighbors, featured actual customers sharing their experiences. The diabetic grandmother who learned about new sugar-free options. The young mother who found organic baby food that helped her son's digestive issues. The college student who got his first job and learned about business by working at the store. The campaign was a massive success. Sales increased by 45% across all 5 stores within 6 months. More importantly, Janet's story began attracting attention from other small business owners who wanted to work with a marketing firm that understood their challenges. As Morrison Marketing Solutions grew, Charlotte found herself being invited to speak at small business conferences and workshops. She developed a reputation as someone who could help David fight Goliath, if David was smart about it. But Charlotte's greatest satisfaction came not from the business success, but from the changes she saw in herself. The woman who had once defined herself through her relationship with Marcus had become someone who stood on her own accomplishments. The woman who had once waited for others to make decisions about her life now made her own choices with confidence and clarity. Emma thrived too. At 3, she was curious about everything, asking endless questions about why flowers grew and where clouds came from and why some people were sad. Charlotte answered every question as honestly as she could, determined that her daughter would grow up understanding that the world was full of possibilities for those brave enough to explore them. The apartment in Queens had become more than just a place to live. It was headquarters for a growing business, a laboratory for creativity, and a sanctuary where a mother and daughter built their lives together. The walls were covered with Emma's artwork, client testimonials, and photos that chronicled their journey from devastation to hope. But Charlotte knew this was just the beginning. Late at night, after Emma was asleep and the freelance work was done, Charlotte would sit at her laptop researching the sustainable energy industry. She studied market trends, technological developments, and corporate strategies. She learned about regulatory changes, environmental policies, and investment patterns. Most importantly, she studied Blackwood Sterling Enterprises. The merger had been successful from a financial perspective. The combined company had grown rapidly, acquiring smaller competitors and securing major government contracts for renewable energy projects. Marcus and Victoria appeared regularly in business publications, often photographed together at industry events and charity galas. They had married in a lavish ceremony covered by society magazines, and Victoria had been named one of Fortune's most powerful women in business for 2 consecutive years. From the outside, it looked like they had everything they had sacrificed Charlotte to achieve. But Charlotte's research revealed cracks in the perfect facade. Employee turnover at Blackwood Sterling was significantly higher than industry averages. Several key executives had left to join competitors, taking important clients with them. There had been 2 sexual harassment lawsuits settled quietly out of court. Most tellingly, the company's innovation had stagnated. While they had grown through acquisitions, they hadn't developed any breakthrough technologies or revolutionary products. They had become exactly what Charlotte expected, a company focused on financial engineering rather than real innovation. They were very good at buying success, but they had forgotten how to create it. Charlotte's plan began to crystallize. She wasn't going to try to compete with Blackwood Sterling in the traditional sense. She couldn't match their resources or their market position. But she could do something they had forgotten how to do. She could innovate. The sustainable energy industry was changing rapidly. New technologies were emerging, consumer preferences were shifting, and regulatory frameworks were evolving. There were opportunities for smaller, more agile companies to enter the market with fresh approaches and disruptive solutions. Charlotte began reaching out to engineers and researchers who had left large corporations to pursue innovative projects. She connected with environmental scientists who were developing new technologies but struggled with commercialization. She networked with investors who were looking for breakthrough opportunities rather than safe bets. Slowly, carefully, she began assembling the pieces of what would become her next venture. The idea came to her while watching Emma play with her building blocks. Emma would create elaborate structures by combining different shaped blocks in ways that shouldn't work, but somehow did. She wasn't constrained by conventional thinking about how blocks were supposed to be used. She simply experimented until she found combinations that achieved her vision. What if sustainable energy worked the same way? What if instead of trying to build bigger versions of existing technologies, someone created new combinations that solved problems in unexpected ways? Charlotte began working on a business plan for a company that would focus on integrated energy solutions for small and medium-sized businesses. Instead of selling individual products like solar panels or wind turbines, they would design custom systems that combined multiple technologies to create optimal solutions for each client's specific needs. The market research was encouraging. Small businesses were increasingly interested in sustainable energy options, but they were overwhelmed by the complexity of available technologies and frustrated by vendors who tried to sell them one-size-fits-all solutions. There was a significant opportunity for a company that could provide consultative, customized approaches. Charlotte spent months refining the concept, developing financial projections, and identifying potential partners. She was methodical and thorough, approaching the project with the same careful attention to detail that had made Morrison Marketing Solutions successful. But there was something else driving her, something deeper than business opportunity or financial potential. This wasn't just about building a company. This was about proving that innovation came from understanding real problems and developing creative solutions, not from acquiring competitors and optimizing balance sheets. This was about showing Marcus and Victoria that the woman they had discarded was capable of building something they never could. As Emma's third birthday approached, Charlotte began preparing to make her move. She had saved enough money to fund the initial development phase of her new company. She had identified potential partners and early customers. Most importantly, she had developed the confidence and skills necessary to compete at the highest levels of business. The little girl who was building impossible towers with colorful blocks was about to watch her mother build something equally ambitious and seemingly impossible. And in Manhattan, Marcus Blackwood and Victoria Sterling had no idea that their past was about to become their future's biggest challenge. The Marriott Marquis Ballroom glittered with crystal and ambition as New York's business elite gathered for the annual Sustainable Energy Innovation Awards. Charlotte stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the familiar dance of networking and power plays she had once navigated as Marcus's fiancée. But tonight, she wasn't here as anyone's plus one. Tonight, she was here as the founder and CEO of Integrated Energy Solutions, and her company was about to change everything. 3.5 years had passed since that devastating night in the penthouse, and Charlotte barely recognized the woman she had been. At 31, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had built something meaningful from nothing. Her dark hair was styled in a sleek bob that framed her face perfectly, and she wore a navy dress she had designed herself. Professional, elegant, but with subtle details that spoke to creativity and innovation. Emma was at home with Charlotte's neighbor, Mrs. S. Patterson, a retired teacher who had become like a grandmother to the little girl. Charlotte had been reluctant to attend tonight's event, but her business partner and closest friend, Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to the bakery owner who had been her first client, had convinced her that their company needed this visibility. Sarah approached now, carrying 2 glasses of champagne and wearing the excited expression of someone who had news to share. At 29, Sarah was a brilliant engineer who had left her position at a major tech company to join Charlotte's vision. Her PhD in renewable energy systems and her gift for explaining complex concepts in simple terms had been instrumental in developing their innovative approach to sustainable energy solutions. "The investors from the Hartwell Group want to meet with us tomorrow," Sarah said, barely containing her excitement. They're talking about a $20 million funding round if we can demonstrate market scalability. Charlotte accepted the champagne but took only a small sip. She had learned to be cautious about good news. Experience had taught her that what seemed too good to be true often was. What did you tell them about our current projects? Everything they needed to hear. The pilot program with Rodriguez Markets is exceeding all performance metrics. The community center project is saving them 40% on energy costs while actually improving their service delivery. And the prototype integration system we developed for small manufacturers is attracting interest from companies across the region. Rodriguez Markets. Janet Rodriguez had been one of Charlotte's first major marketing clients, and when Charlotte launched Integrated Energy Solutions, Janet had trusted her enough to become the first customer for the new venture. The success of that project had become the foundation for everything that followed. Charlotte's approach was fundamentally different from what large companies like Blackwood Sterling offered. Instead of selling individual technologies, Integrated Energy Solutions designed complete systems that combine solar, wind, battery storage, and smart grid technologies in configurations optimized for each client's specific needs. More importantly, they provided ongoing support and optimization services that ensured the systems continued to evolve as technologies improved and client needs changed. It was exactly the kind of innovative, customer-focused approach that Charlotte had always believed in, and it was succeeding beyond her most optimistic projections. Charlotte Morrison, I thought that was you. The voice made Charlotte's blood freeze. She turned slowly to find Victoria Sterling approaching, resplendent in a red gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Victoria looked exactly the same, perfectly groomed, coldly beautiful, and radiating the kind of confidence that came from never having to doubt your place in the world. "It's Charlotte Morrison Chen now," Charlotte said calmly, using the professional name she had adopted when she launched her company. The addition of Chen was a tribute to Mrs. Chen from the bakery, whose faith in Charlotte's abilities had given her the confidence to start over. "Victoria, you look exactly the same." Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. "How nice. I heard you started some little consulting firm. How quaint." Sarah stepped closer to Charlotte, her engineer's mind immediately recognizing a threat to be neutralized. "Actually, Integrated Energy Solutions is revolutionizing how small and medium businesses approach sustainable energy. We're focusing on innovation rather than acquisition." The subtle dig wasn't lost on Victoria, whose smile faltered for just a moment before reasserting itself. "How wonderful. Marcus and I have been so focused on major infrastructure projects that we sometimes forget about the smaller opportunities. The smaller opportunities that represent 60% of the market," Charlotte said pleasantly. "But I understand why Blackwood Sterling might overlook them. It's hard to see the forest when you're focused on clear-cutting the largest trees." Before Victoria could respond, the lights dimmed and the evening's program began. Charlotte was grateful for the interruption, not because she was intimidated by Victoria, but because she preferred to let her work speak rather than engage in verbal sparring matches. The host, a well-known business journalist, began introducing the nominees for various awards. Charlotte felt her stomach tighten as he announced the category for Most Innovative Small Business Solution. This was why she was here. Integrated Energy Solutions had been nominated based on their work with Rodriguez Markets, and winning this award would provide the kind of credibility that could transform her company from a regional success story into a national player. The nominees are Integrated Energy Solutions for their community-focused integrated systems approach, Green Horizons Technologies for their advanced battery storage solutions, and Sustainable Systems, Inc. for their commercial solar optimization platform. Charlotte felt Sarah grab her hand as the host opened the envelope. She held her breath, thinking about Emma sleeping safely at home, about all the small business owners who had trusted her with their energy futures, about the team of dedicated employees who had believed in her vision. And the winner is Integrated Energy Solutions. The applause was thunderous, but Charlotte barely heard it over the rushing of blood in her ears. She had won. Her company, The business she had built from nothing while raising a daughter alone had been recognized as the most innovative small business solution in sustainable energy. As she walked to the podium, Charlotte caught sight of Marcus for the first time in 3.5 years. He was sitting at a table near the front, and the expression on his face was something she had never seen before. Surprise mixed with what might have been respect, and underneath it all, something that looked remarkably like regret. At the podium, Charlotte looked out over the audience of industry leaders, investors, and innovators. For a moment, she was transported back to that devastating night when Marcus had told her she would need to start over. He had been right about that, but he had been wrong about everything else. "Thank you for this incredible honor," Charlotte began, her voice steady and clear. "When I founded Integrated Energy Solutions, I had a simple belief that innovation comes not from having the most resources, but from understanding real problems and developing creative solutions." She paused, letting her eyes find Marcus in the crowd. "I learned that lesson from some of the most unlikely teachers. A bakery owner who needed help with social media, a grocery store chain that wanted to connect with its community, and a 3-year-old daughter who builds impossible towers with building blocks by combining pieces in ways that shouldn't work, but somehow do." The audience laughed, charmed by the personal touch. But Charlotte wasn't finished. "The sustainable energy industry is full of companies that grow through acquisition and optimization. But real innovation, the kind that changes lives and communities, comes from people who are willing to start small, think differently, and build something new from the ground up." As she continued her speech, Charlotte could see the impact of her words rippling through the audience. This wasn't just an acceptance speech. It was a manifesto for a different way of doing business, and people were responding to it. "At Integrated Energy Solutions, we don't just sell energy systems. We partner with our clients to understand their unique needs and develop solutions that grow and evolve with them. We believe that the future of sustainable energy isn't about bigger systems or more efficient acquisitions. It's about smarter integration and genuine innovation." When she finished speaking, the applause was even louder than when her name had been announced. As Charlotte returned to her table, she was approached by a steady stream of potential clients, investors, and partners. The award had been wonderful, but the real victory was the conversations that followed. Serious discussions about projects that could transform her regional success into national influence. But the most significant moment came near the end of the evening, when Marcus approached her table. Charlotte watched him walking toward her, remembering the man she had once loved and comparing him to the stranger who had destroyed her life. He looked older, more tired, and there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before: uncertainty. "Congratulations," he said when he reached her table. "That was an impressive speech." "Thank you," Charlotte replied, her tone politely neutral. Sarah remained seated beside her, a protective presence that Charlotte appreciated. "I wondered if we could talk privately," Marcus continued, "about the past, and maybe the future." Charlotte studied his face, looking for any sign of the man she had once believed she would marry. What she saw instead was someone who had achieved everything he thought he wanted and discovered it wasn't enough. "The past is exactly that, Marcus. And as for the future, mine is quite busy. I have a company to run, a daughter to raise, and a world to change. I don't have time to help you process your regrets." Marcus flinched as if she had slapped him. "Charlotte, I know I hurt you. I know I made mistakes. But we were good together once. What we accomplished together with your marketing insights and my business connections, we could do that again. Better this time." "You're right," Charlotte said, standing up to look him directly in the eyes. "We were good together once. But that was before I learned that you see people as assets to be acquired or discarded based on their strategic value. I'm not interested in being acquired again. Marcus, I prefer building my own empire." She gathered her purse and turned to Sarah. "I think it's time we called it a night. We have an early meeting with the Hartwell Group tomorrow." As they walked away, Charlotte could feel Marcus watching them go. She didn't turn around. There was nothing behind her that she needed to see again. In the taxi ride home, Sarah was practically bouncing with excitement. "Did you see Victoria's face when you won? I thought she was going to shatter her champagne glass." And Marcus looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Charlotte smiled, but her thoughts were already moving beyond the evening's drama to the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. The award was wonderful, but it was just the beginning. Real success would be measured not by how impressed her former fiancé was, but by how many communities she could help, how many jobs she could create, and how sustainable she could make her daughter's future. "Sarah," she said quietly, "I want you to start researching commercial real estate in Manhattan. I think it's time Integrated Energy Solutions had a proper headquarters." The return to Manhattan wouldn't be about proving anything to Marcus or Victoria. It would be about claiming the space she deserved in the industry she was helping to transform. Charlotte Morrison Chen was coming home, but this time, she was coming as a conqueror, not a casualty. The little girl who had once played with building blocks was about to build something that would reshape the skyline of sustainable energy. And the man who had once dismissed her as easily replaceable was about to learn that some things, once lost, could never be acquired again. 6 months after the awards ceremony, Charlotte stood in the corner office of Integrated Energy Solutions' new Manhattan headquarters, looking out over the city that had once held all her dreams and then shattered them completely. The view from the 32nd floor of the Chrysler Building was spectacular, a panoramic sweep of skyscrapers, bridges, and possibilities that stretched to every horizon. The office was a far cry from the spare apartment in Queens where she had started her company. Floor-to-ceiling windows filled the space with natural light, while carefully chosen artwork and plants created an atmosphere that was both professional and welcoming. A small sitting area in one corner contained toys and books for Emma, who often spent time here after school. At 4 years old, Emma was growing into a remarkable little person. She was curious about everything, fearlessly social with the employees who doted on her, and possessed an intuitive understanding of how things worked that sometimes startled the engineers. Charlotte often found herself explaining business concepts to her daughter, who absorbed them with the same enthusiasm she showed for stories about princesses and dragons. "Mommy, why does Mr. Davis look sad today?" Emma asked from her corner, where she was drawing pictures with colored pencils while Charlotte reviewed quarterly reports. Charlotte looked through the glass walls of her office to where David Martinez, her head of business development, was on a phone call that clearly wasn't going well. David had been with the company since the early days, and his ability to translate Charlotte's vision into concrete business opportunities had been crucial to their growth. "Sometimes work can be frustrating, sweetheart," Charlotte said, walking over to see Emma's artwork. "What are you drawing?" "It's our building," Emma said proudly, showing Charlotte a surprisingly accurate representation of the Chrysler Building rendered in crayon. "And these are all the people we help with their energy problems." The drawing showed stick figures standing around the building, smiling and holding what appeared to be miniature suns, Emma's interpretation of solar panels. It was charming, but it also demonstrated something that impressed Charlotte constantly. Her daughter understood that their work was about helping people, not just making money. David knocked on the glass door and entered with the expression of someone bearing bad news. "We need to talk," he said, glancing at Emma. "Maybe somewhere private." Charlotte set up Emma with a tablet and headphones in the sitting area, then led David to the small conference room adjacent to her office. "What's wrong?" "Blackwood Sterling is making moves against our clients," David said without preamble. 3 of our largest accounts have been approached with offers that undercut our pricing by 30%. And these aren't standard competitive bids. They somehow know specific details about our proposals that should be confidential. Charlotte felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she had experienced that night when Marcus and Victoria had announced their betrayal. "Which clients?" "Rodriguez Markets, Thompson Manufacturing, and the Hudson Valley Community Center Network. All 3 are contracts we've been negotiating for months, and all 3 are suddenly facing offers that match our technical specifications exactly but with significantly lower pricing." That's not sustainable pricing, Charlotte said immediately. They're bidding below cost to drive us out of these deals. Exactly. But here's the thing. They know details about our bids that we've only shared with the clients themselves. Specific technical configurations, implementation timelines, even our internal cost structures. Charlotte walked to the window, processing this information. In the 6 months since she had returned to Manhattan, Integrated Energy Solutions had grown rapidly. They now employed 47 people and had projects in 12 states. Their innovative approach to integrated systems was attracting attention from major corporations and government agencies. Success had brought visibility, and visibility had apparently brought unwanted attention. Has anyone left our company recently to join a competitor? She asked. No one with access to this level of detail, David replied. Charlotte, I think we need to consider the possibility that someone is engaging in corporate espionage. The words hung in the air between them. Corporate espionage sounded dramatic, like something from a movie rather than something that would happen to a sustainable energy startup. But Charlotte had learned not to underestimate what people would do when they felt threatened. What do you recommend? She asked. We need to hire a security consultant to do a full audit of our systems and processes, and we need to be much more careful about how we handle sensitive information. Charlotte nodded, but her mind was already working on a different level. Blackwood Sterling's aggressive tactics weren't just about competition, they were about elimination. Someone had decided that Integrated Energy Solutions was enough of a threat to justify extraordinary measures. David, I want you to do something for me, she said. Contact our 3 affected clients and tell them we need to meet immediately. Don't discuss any details over the phone or email. Just arrange face-to-face meetings. All three today. And David, I want you to prepare alternative proposals for each of them. Different technical approaches, different timelines, different everything. If someone is stealing our bids, let's give them something interesting to steal. After David left, Charlotte returned to her office where Emma was still absorbed in her tablet. Charlotte sat at her desk and began making notes, but her thoughts kept drifting to the implications of what David had told her. This felt personal in a way that pure business competition wouldn't. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. We need to talk. There are things you need to know about Victoria. Meet me at the coffee shop on 47th and Lex at 6 p.m. Come alone. A friend. Charlotte stared at the message, her mind racing through possibilities. It could be a trap, an attempt to lure her into a vulnerable situation, but it could also be someone with information she needed. In either case, she couldn't ignore it. She spent the rest of the afternoon conducting the client meetings David had arranged. What she learned confirmed her suspicions. All 3 clients had received competing bids that were remarkably similar to Integrated Energy Solutions proposals, down to specific technical details that should have been proprietary. But she also learned something else. All 3 clients remained loyal to her company despite the lower competing bids. Rodriguez had said it best. Charlotte, you didn't just sell us an energy system. You became our partner. These other people are just trying to sell us something cheaper. We know the difference. That loyalty was both heartening and concerning. It meant her business model was working. Clients valued the relationship and ongoing support as much as the technical solution. But it also meant that her competitors might escalate their tactics if straightforward underbidding didn't work. At 6 o'clock, Charlotte found herself at the coffee shop specified in the text message. She had arranged for Mrs. Patterson to pick up Emma from the office and had told Sarah where she was going. Just in case. The shop was crowded with the evening rush of office workers grabbing caffeine for their commutes, providing good cover for a discreet conversation. She didn't have to wait long. A woman in her early 30s approached her table, someone Charlotte recognized but couldn't immediately place. She was attractive in a professional way, with auburn hair and intelligent eyes that held a mixture of nervousness and determination. Charlotte Morrison Chen, the woman asked, extending her hand. I'm Jennifer Walsh. I used to work at Blackwood Sterling. Charlotte shook her hand while studying her face. Used to work there. I quit 3 weeks ago, Jennifer said, sitting down across from Charlotte. I couldn't be part of what they're doing anymore. Which is, Jennifer looked around the crowded coffee shop, then leaned forward and lowered her voice. Victoria Sterling has been obsessed with you since that award ceremony. She's convinced that you're trying to steal Marcus back, and she's determined to destroy your company before you can become a real threat. Charlotte felt a laugh bubble up in her chest, not from humor, but from disbelief. She thinks I'm trying to steal Marcus back. I wouldn't take Marcus Blackwood if he came with $1 billion dowry and a written apology. I know that, and you know that. But Victoria sees everything as a threat to her position. She's been using company resources to monitor your business, steal your proposals, and undercut your bids. But that's just the beginning. What do you mean? Jennifer reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. I copied some files before I left. Victoria has been developing what she calls a comprehensive competitive strategy against your company. It includes plans to poach your key employees, sabotage your major projects, and spread rumors about your financial stability to potential investors. Charlotte took the flash drive, feeling its weight in her palm. Such a small thing to contain what sounded like evidence of serious corporate misconduct. Why are you telling me this? Why risk getting involved? Because I've seen what Victoria does to people who get in her way, Jennifer said, her voice tight with emotion. And because I was raised to believe that business should be about creating value, not destroying competitors through illegal means. Illegal means, the proposal theft is just the start. She's been using private investigators to dig into your personal life, looking for anything she can use against you. She's contacted your former clients from your marketing business, trying to convince them that you abandoned them when something better came along. She's even had people contact Emma's school, claiming to be conducting background checks for security purposes. The mention of Emma sent a chill through Charlotte's entire body. She could accept that Victoria might target her business, or even her personally. But involving her daughter crossed a line that Charlotte hadn't even known existed. What kind of background checks? Charlotte asked, her voice dangerously quiet. I don't know the specifics, but Victoria made comments about how difficult it must be for you to maintain stability for Emma, given your history of poor judgment in relationships. Jennifer looked genuinely uncomfortable delivering this information. Charlotte, I think she's building a case to challenge your custody of Emma. The coffee shop around them faded into background noise as Charlotte processed this information. Victoria wasn't just trying to destroy her business. She was trying to destroy her life completely. Again. There's something else, Jennifer continued. Marcus doesn't know about most of this. Victoria has been careful to keep him focused on legitimate business matters while she handles what she calls competitive intelligence. I think she's afraid that if he knew what she was really doing, he might try to stop her. Charlotte almost laughed at that. Marcus stopped Victoria, the man who had stood by and watched while Victoria destroyed Charlotte's life once before. You have more faith in Marcus than I do. Maybe, but I thought you should know that this isn't coming from him. This is all Victoria, and she's completely out of control. Charlotte pocketed the flash drive and stood up. Jennifer, I appreciate you taking this risk to warn me, but I have one question. What do you want in return? Jennifer looked surprised by the question. Nothing. I just want to be able to sleep at night knowing I did the right thing. Are you looking for a new job? Yes, actually, I was Victoria's head of strategic analysis, but I can't put that on my resume without explaining why I left. Call David Martinez at my company tomorrow, Charlotte said, handing Jennifer her business card. Tell him I asked him to speak with you about opportunities on our strategic planning team. Jennifer's eyes widened. You're offering me a job just like that. I'm offering you an interview, Charlotte corrected. But someone with your background who has the courage to do the right thing when it costs them something, that's someone I want on my team. As Charlotte walked back to her office, her mind was already formulating a response to Victoria's escalation. The flash drive in her pocket contained evidence of corporate espionage and possibly much more serious crimes. She could turn it over to law enforcement and let the legal system handle Victoria Sterling. But Charlotte had learned something important in the years since her world had been destroyed. The legal system was slow, uncertain, and often favored those with more resources and better lawyers. If she wanted to protect Emma and her company, she needed to be more strategic. Victoria Sterling had made a fundamental error in judgment. She assumed that Charlotte was the same vulnerable woman who had been easily discarded 3.5 years ago. She assumed that Charlotte would be defensive, reactive, and focused on protecting what she had built. Victoria had no idea that Charlotte Morrison Chen wasn't interested in just protecting her empire. She was interested in expanding it, and she was about to learn that some battles were won not by defending, but by attacking so decisively that your opponent never had a chance to recover. The war between Charlotte Morrison Chen and Victoria Sterling was about to begin in earnest. But this time, Charlotte wasn't going to be the victim. This time, she was going to be the conqueror. The morning sun streamed through the conference room windows as Charlotte sat across from Marcus Blackwood, studying the man who had once been her entire world. 6 months had passed since Jennifer Walsh's warning, and the corporate war that followed had transformed both of their companies in ways neither had anticipated. Marcus looked exhausted. His once confident demeanor had been replaced by something Charlotte had never seen in him before: genuine humility. Dark circles under his eyes suggested sleepless nights, and the way he fidgeted with his coffee cup revealed a nervousness that was completely foreign to the man she remembered. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Marcus said, his voice quieter than Charlotte remembered. "I know you have every reason to refuse." Charlotte nodded but said nothing. She had agreed to this meeting not out of any remaining feelings for Marcus, but because the situation had become larger than their personal history. The evidence Jennifer had provided had exposed a network of corporate espionage and illegal business practices that reached far beyond Victoria's obsession with Charlotte. The FBI investigation that followed had implicated several other companies and resulted in multiple arrests. Victoria Sterling was currently awaiting trial on charges of corporate espionage, wire fraud, and conspiracy. She had been released on bail but was prohibited from participating in any business operations. Blackwood Sterling Enterprises was in chaos, with investors fleeing and partners canceling contracts. "I want to start by apologizing," Marcus continued, "not just for what I did to you 3.5 years ago, but for what I allowed to happen since then. I knew Victoria was aggressive in her business practices, but I convinced myself that I didn't need to know the details. I was wrong." Charlotte sipped her coffee, still processing the surreal nature of this conversation. The Marcus who had once dismissed her so coldly was now seeking her forgiveness, not for their broken engagement, but for enabling the woman who had tried to destroy Charlotte's life completely. "Marcus," she said finally, "I appreciate the apology, but I need you to understand something. I'm not here because I'm interested in relitigating our past. I'm here because what happened affects the entire industry, and we need to find a way forward that serves everyone's best interests." "I understand," Marcus said quickly, "and I want you to know that I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to make things right." "What does that mean exactly?" Marcus reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I've had my legal team prepare an offer. Blackwood Sterling will transfer all of our small and medium business contracts to Integrated Energy Solutions, along with the technical staff and resources needed to service them. We'll also provide access to our research and development on integrated systems technology." Charlotte opened the folder and scanned the documents inside. What Marcus was proposing was essentially the dismantling of a significant portion of his company's operations, the very division that competed most directly with her business. "This would cost you millions in revenue," she said. "Yes, it would, but it would also ensure that our clients continue to receive the kind of innovative, personalized service that your company provides. And honestly, Charlotte, we were never good at the small business market. We were trying to compete with you by using Victoria's methods. But what you've built requires a completely different approach." Charlotte set down the folder and looked directly at Marcus. "What you're describing isn't just a business transaction. You're essentially admitting that our entire business model is superior to yours?" "Yes," Marcus said without hesitation. That's exactly what I'm admitting. The simplicity of his response surprised Charlotte. The Marcus she had known had been incapable of admitting weakness or acknowledging that someone else might have a better approach. But the man sitting across from her seemed genuinely changed by the events of the past months. Marcus, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever think about what might have happened if you had made different choices 3.5 years ago? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the city skyline. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Every day. I think about it every day. And what do you think would have happened? I think we would have built something remarkable together, he said, meeting her eyes for the first time since the conversation began. I think I would have been a father to Emma instead of a stranger who sends monthly checks. I think I would have learned to value innovation over acquisition and relationships over transactions. I think I would have been happy instead of successful. Charlotte felt something shift inside her chest. Not a return of old feelings, but a recognition of genuine remorse. The Marcus sitting across from her wasn't the same man who had coldly dismissed her while she was pregnant. This man had been humbled by loss in a way that the old Marcus never could have understood. You know, she said softly, Emma asks about you sometimes. Marcus looked up sharply, hope and pain warring in his expression. She does. She knows you're her biological father, and she's curious about you. I've always told her that you weren't ready to be a father when she was born, but that people can change and grow. Do you think, Marcus started, then stopped, seemingly afraid to finish the question. Do I think what? Do you think there might be a place in her life for me? Not as someone trying to replace what she has with you, but as someone who wants to know his daughter. Charlotte considered the question carefully. The angry, protective part of her wanted to reject the idea immediately. Marcus had forfeited his right to be Emma's father when he chose Victoria and corporate success over family. But the wiser part of her, the part that had been shaped by years of building something positive from devastation, recognized that this could be an opportunity for healing that extended beyond her own needs. That would depend entirely on you, she said finally. Emma has a stable, happy life. If you want to be part of it, you would need to understand that her well-being comes first. Always. You would need to be consistent, reliable, and patient. You would need to earn her trust slowly, without any guarantees about what kind of relationship might develop. I understand, Marcus said immediately. I want to try. I want to be the father I should have been from the beginning. Charlotte nodded slowly. Then we can start slowly. Maybe you could come to one of her soccer games. She plays on Saturday mornings in Central Park. The relief on Marcus's face was so profound that Charlotte almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Thank you, he said. You don't know what this means to me. Marcus, Charlotte said, her tone becoming more serious. I need you to understand something. This isn't about us getting back together or rebuilding our old relationship. That person I was, and that relationship we had, those things don't exist anymore. I'm offering the possibility of a limited relationship between you and Emma, because I believe children benefit from having loving adults in their lives. When those adults have earned that privilege, I understand completely, Marcus said. I'm not asking for anything more than the chance to know my daughter and to prove that I can be someone worthy of her trust. Charlotte spent the rest of the meeting reviewing the business proposal Marcus had presented. It was generous, perhaps overly generous, but it also made strategic sense for both companies. The small and medium business market was indeed better suited to integrated energy solutions approach, while Blackwood Industries could focus on the large infrastructure projects where they had genuine advantages. More importantly, the proposal would allow Charlotte to expand her company's reach rapidly while maintaining the personalized service model that had made them successful. It would mean hiring more employees, opening regional offices, and potentially transforming integrated energy solutions from a successful regional company into a national leader in sustainable energy. As the meeting concluded, Charlotte felt an unexpected sense of closure, Not the kind of romantic reconciliation that movies usually portrayed, but something more mature and ultimately more satisfying. The recognition that people could grow, change, and find ways to move forward that honored both their past mistakes and their current wisdom. That afternoon, Charlotte returned to her office to find Emma in the corner, working on a new drawing while Sarah reviewed technical specifications at the conference table. The normalcy of the scene, her daughter creating art while her business partner solved complex engineering problems, reminded Charlotte of how much her life had evolved since those dark days when everything seemed lost. "How did your meeting go?" Sarah asked, looking up from her papers. "Better than expected," Charlotte replied, sitting down beside Emma to see her latest creation. "What are you drawing today, sweetheart?" "It's our new building," Emma said proudly. "The one we're going to build when we get bigger." The drawing showed a tall building covered in what appeared to be solar panels, with stick figures standing around it, holding hands. At the top of the building, Emma had drawn a flag with the letters IES, Integrated Energy Solutions. "That's a beautiful building," Charlotte said, hugging her daughter. "Do you think we'll really build something like that someday?" "Yes," Emma said with the absolute certainty that only 4-year-olds possessed. "And it's going to help lots of people." As Charlotte looked at her daughter's drawing, she realized that this was what victory actually looked like. Not the dramatic confrontation with enemies or the public recognition of success, but the quiet confidence of a child who believed her mother could build anything and help anyone. The journey from that devastating night in the penthouse to this moment in her own office had been longer and more difficult than Charlotte could have imagined. But it had also been more transformative than she had dared to hope. She had discovered strengths she didn't know she possessed, built relationships deeper than any she had experienced, and created something that would outlast any personal drama or corporate conflict. Looking out at the Manhattan skyline, Charlotte thought about the various forms of power and success. There was the kind of power that came from acquiring and controlling others, the kind that Marcus and Victoria had pursued. But there was also the kind of power that came from creating value, building relationships, and helping others succeed, the kind that she had discovered almost by accident while trying to survive. The first kind of power was ultimately fragile, dependent on maintaining dominance over others, and vulnerable to the same tactics used to acquire it. The second kind of power was more sustainable because it was based on genuine value creation and mutual benefit. Emma's drawing represented the future that Charlotte was building, not just for her company, but for her daughter and for all the communities they served. It was a future based on innovation, cooperation, and the understanding that true success came from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. As the sun set over Manhattan, Charlotte began planning for the expansion that Marcus's proposal would make possible. There would be new challenges, of course, and new competitors who might try to copy Victoria's destructive tactics. But Charlotte was no longer the vulnerable woman who could be easily discarded or intimidated. She was Charlotte Morrison Chen, CEO and founder of Integrated Energy Solutions, mother to an extraordinary little girl, an architect of a business model that was changing how sustainable energy companies approach their work. More importantly, she was someone who had learned that the most powerful response to betrayal and loss wasn't revenge, but the creation of something so meaningful and valuable that it transcended whatever had been destroyed. The little girl who had once played with building blocks, creating impossible structures through creative combinations of simple pieces, was watching her mother build something equally ambitious and seemingly impossible, a company, a life, and a future that proved that some things, once broken, could be rebuilt stronger than they had ever been before. And in that rebuilding, everyone involved, even those who had caused the initial destruction, had the opportunity to become better versions of themselves than they had ever imagined possible. The war was over, the healing had begun, and the future was full of possibilities that none of them had seen coming. The headquarters of Integrated Energy Solutions now occupied 3 floors of a gleaming new building in downtown Manhattan, with regional offices in 12 cities and over 300 employees. The company had become the largest provider of integrated sustainable energy solutions for small and medium businesses in North America. and their innovative approach had been adopted by competitors across the industry. Charlotte stood in her office, watching 9-year-old Emma work on homework at the small desk Charlotte had installed near the windows. Emma was now an expert on renewable energy systems, having grown up surrounded by engineers and environmental scientists who treated her questions with the same seriousness they brought to client consultations. On the bookshelf behind Charlotte's desk sat the Sustainable Energy Innovation Award she had won 5 years earlier, along with numerous other recognitions the company had received. But the item she treasured most was a framed drawing, Emma's original sketch of their future building, which had proven to be remarkably accurate in its vision. Marcus had become a regular presence in Emma's life, attending her soccer games, school plays, and science fairs with the dedication of someone making up for lost time. He had never attempted to insert himself into Charlotte's personal life beyond their shared parenting responsibilities, and their relationship had evolved into something Charlotte had never expected, a functional co-parenting partnership based on mutual respect and shared commitment to Emma's well-being. Victoria Sterling had been convicted and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. Blackwood Industries had recovered from the scandal by focusing exclusively on large infrastructure projects and government contracts, finding a niche that allowed them to succeed without competing directly with integrated energy solutions. Sarah had been promoted to Chief Technology Officer and had married David Martinez in a ceremony held in the company's main conference room, with Emma serving as flower girl and Charlotte as maid of honor. The couple was expecting their first child, and Charlotte had already promised that Integrated Energy Solutions would be the most family-friendly workplace in the industry. But perhaps the most significant change was the one that had happened within Charlotte herself. The angry, defensive woman who had been determined to prove herself to those who had wronged her had been replaced by someone more confident, more generous, and more focused on building the future than relitigating the past. As she watched Emma solve math problems with the same methodical approach Charlotte brought to engineering challenges, Charlotte realized that her daughter had never known a world where her mother wasn't successful, confident, and in control of her own destiny. That was perhaps the greatest victory of all, not just surviving devastation, but transforming it into something so positive that the next generation didn't even understand what had been overcome. The intercom buzzed, and Sarah's voice filled the office. "Charlotte, the delegation from the Department of Energy is here for the 4 o'clock meeting." "Send them up," Charlotte replied, straightening her jacket and checking her reflection in the window. Today's meeting was about a potential contract that would bring integrated energy solutions to federal buildings across the country, a project that could double the company's size and influence. "Mom," Emma said, looking up from her homework, "are you nervous about the meeting?" "A little," Charlotte admitted. "It's a very big opportunity." "You'll do great," Emma said with absolute confidence. "You always do." As Charlotte prepared for what could be the most important business meeting of her career, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 5 years ago, she had been focused on proving that she could succeed despite what Marcus and Victoria had done to her. Today, she was focused on creating solutions that could help address climate change while building sustainable communities. The motivation had shifted from personal vindication to global impact, and in that shift, Charlotte had discovered something she hadn't expected: true fulfillment. The company she had built was now bigger than her own story, more important than her personal relationships, and more meaningful than any individual success or failure. Standing in her office, looking out over the city where she had once lost everything and then rebuilt it all, Charlotte Morrison Chen understood that the greatest revenge against those who tried to destroy you wasn't to destroy them in return. It was to build something so valuable, so positive, and so enduring that their attempts at destruction became irrelevant footnotes in a much larger story. The little girl who had once built impossible towers with colorful blocks had grown into a woman who built impossible dreams with vision, determination, and the understanding that some structures were strong enough to withstand any storm. And the future she was building would benefit not just her own family, but generations of families who would inherit a world powered by sustainable energy and guided by the principle that success meant lifting others up rather than tearing them down. The meeting went well. The contract was signed. The future continued to unfold according to plans that were both impossible and inevitable. Like all the best dreams that somehow become reality,